Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube video. And for those of you that are wondering, today is St. Patrick's Day, so happy St. Patty's Day. Anyways, I wanted to do a show about anniversaries. And this year, we are coming about to our year anniversary of when things started to shut down in Florida and everywhere actually around the country. And so I did do a podcast about this also, Pandemic Anniversary. So I just wanted to acknowledge, like, typically what happens when we go through anniversary. A lot of times we think about anniversaries as like exciting things. The anniversary of like wedding anniversaries or dates and time where we typically want to celebrate. However, there are other instances when we come up to the year date. You know, what I see in the office sometimes, when we come up to a year of a betrayal or anything traumatic that's happened, it's been a year. And so this year, this video, I really just wanted to just some quick tips on how to help yourself kind of process the year. Anytime a traumatic event happens, we usually go through kind of like a state of denial or shock. And we kind of go through that and we think that, eventually we start to feel feelings. They're not always great feelings because we typically go through a grieving process. After a traumatic event and we're out of the shock denial phase, we go through a significant grieving process. And I think one of the things with the pandemic is we thought at some point it was going to end, and it's still going on. And so I think, part of this is as we're kind of coming into this year anniversary, so it's been a year and now what? It's like, okay, it's been a year and things are still happening. Things are still changing. There's still uncertainty. There's still fear about, being safe and not wanting to be sick. And, we're still kind of going through a lot of anxiety about what's happening. So, I think what I like to do when it comes, at least in my own life, when I've had things happen and it comes to the year mark or the anniversary date of a traumatic event, I like to reflect. What are the things that I have learned? And the reflection doesn't have to be painful or hurtful or bringing back or making ourselves go through like all the tough stuff. The reflection is, what have I learned about myself? What has changed as a result of going through a significant event? And that change, it can be positive or negative, but how have I grown from that? And so I think, being able to look at the reflections of what has changed as a result, positive or negative, or what have I learned about myself? How have I grown? It gives us something a little bit more concrete to hold on to instead of, us just kind of holding on to all the things that we've lost. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is honor our grief. Taking time, I'm not saying that we haven't been grieving this whole time, but I think sometimes when we're trying to move forward, we're trying to stuff our grief or not pay attention to it or just kind of put blinders on so we can just try to keep going. And what I would say in our year anniversary or when we come to that year date, it's okay to pause. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to honor all the things that we have lost as a result of going through this really difficult time. And in some ways, when we can honor our grief, we're able to honor the thing that we lost, whether it was a person in our lives that have passed away or maybe an experience. You didn't get to go through graduation or you had to replan your wedding, whatever that might be. When we can honor our grief, we actually can connect to it and connect to the thing that we lost in a healthy way in order to also help us continue to move forward. So I think that that's another important step. And the last thing is, as we go through this anniversary, is just in some ways honoring the connections that we've made. I think anytime we go through a significant event, change occurs whether we want it to or not. And that's why I want you to reflect and look at how you've grown. That's why I want you to honor your grief. And then you make connections along the way. Whether you learn something new about yourself or you make a connection with someone that maybe you would have never met before, or someone who hasn't come into your life, but you make connections along the way. And so how have you connected to others, whether it's your spouse or partner, yourself, or maybe you've met some new people along the way. So honor and celebrate those connections. And then here's the last thing. The last thing is, what are the things that you have in your life now that maybe you wouldn't have had before? Even for example, in my therapy practice, I never would have done telehealth before. And now I am. And there are things that I really like about telehealth. Although I still value the in-person, what I once thought was going to be a really negative thing, especially at the beginning of this pandemic and having to shut down, I actually can appreciate now. So, looking at what has changed, what are some new things that you've incorporated in your life now that maybe you never would have done before? Or again, it goes back to, what have you learned? So there's just about 4 things as we come up on this anniversary that I want you guys to think about. Again, it's the reflections, it's honoring your grief, it's looking at what connections you have made and how they've helped you along the way. And then the last thing is, what are some new things that you've brought into your life and you've incorporated now as a result of going through this pandemic? All right, guys. Oh, and by the way, this is something that you can do with yourself. This is something you and your partner can kind of go through. And if you have a family, depending on the age of your kids, it wouldn't be bad to kind of have a family meeting about some of these things too, just to get their perspective and input on how they've kind of coped or learned how to process their own emotions and what they've learned along the way of this pandemic too. Okay, so that's it, guys. Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for weekly updates all about relationships and mental health. And I hope you have a great day. Take care.